Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar today. I'm Francis Seeley from GlobalNet 21 and Enfield Climate Action Forum. And here we talk about a number of issues, usually around climate change. And today we're going to talk about how we actually engage our members of parliament around the existential crisis of climate change. And we're lucky because we've got two people with us, Jessica Townsend and Tom Hardy, who have been active for a long time in combating climate change as an issue. And they also are developing a national site called MP Watch, and we're going to talk to them about that. But first, it would be good to know a little bit about each of them. So if I could start with you, Tom, could you tell us just a little bit about your background?
Well, I'm a retired academic. I had a very long career in education and very comfortable life and very carefree. And when the IPCC report came out, suddenly I realized that to be carefree was no longer going to be a thing, especially thinking about my children. I had been an advisor to various government education departments in my time, and I thought that was a good place to start. And I spent a lot of time challenging denialism in the government through the press. And so that's how I came to this. That was my strand.
Okay, and Jessica, what about you?
Actually, kind of similarly to Tom, I had completely different kind of career before. Mine focused mostly on media. I've been a journalist and also a playwright and a screenwriter. And I was actually having a go at writing a novel, and I was doing lots of research into what life would be like in 2030. And when I started reading the climate science and books by people like George Monbiot, I couldn't believe it. I thought, why isn't everyone talking about this? It seemed like there was such a disconnect. It was like going into the Matrix or something. And so like Tom, that's changed my life.
Okay, so we're going to talk about MP Watch, and we'll do that later. But Tom, can I ask you first, I mean, why do you think it's important that we should engage MPs on this particular issue?
Well, they still don't get it, do they? Sunak's people's priorities, and none of them address climate change at all. And there is the problem of the electoral cycle and the need to keep things tight, but a long-term vision just isn't within the government's DNA. And if they do get it, then they get it. It's through self-interest that they're keeping it quiet. I attend Conservative Environment Network meetings occasionally, and on one occasion, I was talking to Victoria Prentice, who'd just given a talk about agriculture, and to one side I said, yes, but do you not worry about the 7 degrees of warming that Chatham House talked about? And she said, I'm absolutely terrified. In fact, I thought I saw a tear. And I thought, well, if you're terrified, why aren't you doing something about it? If your terror is that much, why isn't this top of your agenda? And why are you not pushing this in cabinet? So that's why, I think.
Well, I mean, if you read Isabella Hartman's book about why we get the wrong MPs, you probably get to know why she has tears in her eyes but doesn't do anything about it. And I was just wondering, Jessica, I mean, are MPs the right people to really concentrate on when they are subject to party discipline and corporate pressure, money, lobbying? Shouldn't we be concentrating on where the real culprits are? Are our MPs not as influential rather as we think they are?
No, that's a really interesting question. And in a way, you're absolutely right. But let's just think about Brexit. There Then a group of MPs, Maverick MPs, the ERG group, created absolute havoc by going to war against Theresa May's soft deal, what they thought of as a soft deal. So MPs can mobilise and they can be effective. Unfortunately for us, that group of MP is actually against us in this particular fight. And Tom and I were super depressed to realise that the hard right ERG group were going to all get behind climate denial. Before Brexit kind of settled, it seemed some of them were engaged, but it was to our horror that they then mobilised in the other direction. And if the other thing is, I think a lot of people just don't feel that they have all that much power as citizens. And our MPs are supposed to represent us. So part of this is a journey for the citizenship as well, by asserting their democratic rights. I think a lot of people feel cynical about politics, and we're saying, stop, let's try it differently. Let's play it straight and try and make it work. And if we influence some of those MPs, they will be telling the whips, yeah, okay, you're putting pressure on me to vote this way, but my constituents are putting pressure on me to vote the other way. And we can change the culture of Parliament.
Okay, well, let's look at how you're trying to do it. Locally, we've started an MP Watch where we're asking 2 of our 3 MPs, and we hope it will be all 3 ultimately, questions once a month about climate change. Now, you're doing a national initiative on this MP Watch. Is that what you hope to do as well, Tom, or are you planning to go further than that?
Well, of course, we started from the standpoint of looking at the hardcore, as Jessica says, the hardcore of people, mostly who have relationships with Townsend Street, and the ERG turned it, are part of that morass of the Townsend Street think tanks. But as a retired teacher, I do know that you have to have carrots as well as sticks. And to be a critical friend to a wider constituency of MPs is possibly more valuable an approach. And of course, one has to be careful of the backfire effect, whereby if you're constantly banging a drum, people entrench. So I think that I think the positive view as well as the combative view is very important in this.
But concentrating on those deniers, that group of Conservative MPs, Jessica, I can understand why you're doing it, and I can understand what you're saying, and I can understand the influence that they have, which has been tremendous on the government, small group having a big influence. But in a way, will you be able to affect those particular MPs because they have their views because it's a part of their neoliberal ideology? And when you challenge them on climate change, you're challenging them on the core of their being. And that's really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think we have to, though. I think that we can't just assume that nobody's for turning. I think long term, most of those climate deniers, quite a few of them who are in very marginal seats, by the way, will not turn because they've got too much invested in it. But let's remember, we're on the right side of history here. At some point, some of them will have to see the truth. But whether it helps us politically or helps our cause will be another matter. Some like Nigel Lawson will go to their grave with wrong-headed views. But it would be amazing. I mean, with the Steve Baker Watch group, which was our first one, what we would have loved, and he's a Christian, was a road to Damascus moment where he read the science, got it, and said, wow, I've been wrong. And he is the sort of guy that pulls tricks and shenanigans. So but I mean, we knew it was sort of a pipe dream. So we have to, though, approach people as if they are decent human beings. And that's part of what MP Watch wants to do. The culture of our politics is very degraded. And we believe that we need a culture of honesty and our politicians leveling with us about exactly what's going on. And we're working with a very interesting thinker called Mike Berners-Lee, who's got a couple of books behind him. And he's very enthusiastic about the MP Watch campaign. And I think that means that even with deniers, who we will be critiquing, it won't feel like we're bullying them, because we're asking them to step up, and we ourselves are being courteous and treating them as proper humans.
So, Jessica, are you trying in the MP Watch to get not just the deniers, but a whole series of MPs together? And are you trying to get groups across the country to get involved in that? And how successful have you been in that so far?
Really successful. We've a lot of people, where it works best is where people come forward and say, this is my MP. I think they're the worst MP in Britain. So many people think their MP is the worst MP in Britain. It's quite interesting. And their enthusiasm and their local connections help them build a group. Where it's been a little bit harder is where we've decided from outside that it would be a good idea for there to be a group. So, for example, there is a big climate denier called Graham Stringer, who's Labour and is in Manchester. And we've had problems finding people. So if anybody listening knows anybody over there who might be interested in starting a group, it's really important for us, because we're apolitical, to challenge the one big Labour climate denier. And we're still working on that, but it's been a thorny one. But more recently, groups have been blossoming. I mean, we felt very lucky when you approached us. We love what you're doing in Enfield. And I'm always trying to broadcast what you're doing into the national group, hoping that other groups might want to do the same thing, because as well as individual groups, it would be great if we had groups across regions who could support each other, come out if there were like little pickets of the constituency offices, and or, you know, people wanted to make a point about the sewage in the rivers, those kind of issues. They could collaborate across regions.
Well, I mean, as you know, Tom, you know, when I became involved, I was very concerned that we involved MPs who weren't just deniers, but MPs who, you know, had a tick against climate change, but because they have to follow their party whips and so on, they aren't necessarily going to take the action that we would like. So, Tom, I mean, how important is it for us to engage Labour and Green MPs as well?
Well, it's very important. As Jessica says, we are strictly non-aligned. It's inevitable that, since a core problem is the neoliberalism of the Tory party, but of course Labour bases their promises, their electoral promises, on growing the economy. So you know, the core problem is across the board, and of course there are, you know, we have to give credit to for support from people like Rory Stewart. Rory Stewart, of course, had his epiphany, which, you know, caused him to leave, and I had a conversation with him, which I hope I'm not divulging, that he would approve. He's very much for the idea of deliberative democracy, and he regretted the fact that he was confined by the whip for all those years. So yes, we do have to appreciate that people are confined by the whip, but we also have to appreciate when, you know, they are prodigal sons, so to speak. We've talked about Graham Stringer, so
yeah. Okay, we certainly talked about Graham Stringer. I mean, with our MP, one of them, for example, Dan Ambos, we recently asked him a question about cutting emissions and so on, and he talked about how important it is to reduce fossil fuels, and he's really pleased that the Labour Party has now got this green policy, sort of Green New Deal type of, not exactly full one, but type of. But, you know, our next question to him, which went today, Jessica, is, okay, but green growth is growth. It does hit against the sustainable planet boundaries because it extracts all the time. So we need to challenge them as well, don't we? And you have Ed Miliband up as a champion of green policy, but he is the one advocating green growth. We have to challenge them on that as well, don't we?
We do, but I do think it's necessary to celebrate good practice, because otherwise we're in a grim old world, and you know the climate realities are pretty grim anyway. So but you know, I hope, well, my understanding at the moment is that the Labour policies on climate are stronger than the Conservatives, but they are nobody's dream. They don't fulfill what the scientists want. So if Labour do get in, we will have a step forward. Green energy is definitely going to be very exciting as a national project. But it will be that the front line has moved, and we're still going to have the fight of our lives on our hands. So we're not living in some sort of cloud cuckoo land that we think, you know, if only somebody who has an attachment to an idea of a Green New Deal gets in, then everything's sorted. It really isn't. You're absolutely right.
But I mean, we could talk about good practice in terms of words, and we could talk of good practice in terms of action. And obviously, we have to, you know, look at people and make them accountable for their actions. And that goes, doesn't it, Tom, for the Green Party as well. We might say, yeah, great, Caroline Lucas and all that, but there is a debate within the Green Party between post-growth versus green growth. And in some sense, we have to challenge them on that as well, whether growth and green extraction is compatible, don't we?
Yes. Yes. I mean, the challenges are across the board. Of course, the Green Party, it's, you know, there are going to be divisions and arguments in any particular forum, in any party. And nothing as yet has been proposed by any political party that is ideal. But I think we have to keep the eye on the prize, the ideal, and be careful that, you know, the adage that the revolution will eat itself. We have to be careful that we don't get involved in the kind of infighting about economics beyond saying that all of this has to change. If we get involved in that morass of argument, then we lose our, you know, our aspiration, our main aspiration. I mean, the Green Party has loads of problems within its own policy making. So, you know, they are the one, obviously the front runners in this, but, you know, we can't get involved in local issues really.
But Tom, it's not just parties, is it? And yeah. Jessica, I think, made a really good point earlier. The MP Watch can be a means of mobilizing community groups. And if you're going to influence MPs, they are worried about re-election. And if you actually mobilize community groups, not just political parties, because they may not change or they may change more slowly, but if you mobilize political groups, that becomes important. So MP Watch is not just a way, isn't it, of engaging MPs, it's a way of engaging groups to engage their MPs, and that's equally important.
Absolutely it is. And I think too many people have felt, I including myself, just dismayed at where our politics is. We obviously do not have a system that is fit for purpose at the moment. Our world is very complex, and we need imaginative democratic instruments. Personally, I think we probably need proportional representation, and if we moved in that direction, then it would open people's minds to being more creative. Citizens' assemblies advising government departments and looking at the climate issue with some teeth, rather than there has been one, but its recommendations weren't followed. I mean, and there are models like in Taiwan where they use online kind of citizen consultative practices to challenge the big issues. So imagine with the water issue, if the government put up a some kind of website where lots of different people put in their points of view, and it's not just shock horror, this is terrible. What the Taiwanese model does is it gets people to state their positions, and then it says, what compromises would you make in order to have a way forward? And so all the different sides and aspects of the argument have to kind of give away some of what they want in order to find some middle ground. So exactly the opposite of the referendum that was so damaging to our country would be this kind of more sophisticated democratic process. And I'm dreaming there, but that is the direction I think we need to go in. And we're trying to move a system. It isn't just, it's a complex system. And also the understanding of individuals, even, us, is evolving all the time. We're part of a process. And I'm sure that in 5 years, we will see things quite differently to how we see them now. Events will happen, but also there'll be more data from the climate science and more political surprises as well.
So, I mean, what you're talking about is a movement towards deliberative democracy, and that's important. And you talk about system change, and Tom, we really have to deal with this problem by attacking on all fronts, don't we? It's not just, MP Watch is great, but it's not the only thing. It's got to be corporations, it's got to be communities, it's got to be businesses, and so on. So do you look upon this as part of a total approach to looking at climate change and trying to involve not just one element of the community, but the totality as well?
Yes, across the board, but we are, we're trying to grow a grassroots movement amongst other grassroots movement, and hopefully between all of us we become a force majeure, which not only influences MPs and makes them worry about their own electoral chances. Remember, 80% of the population thinks this should be a priority, and I think with people, with the movement to divest from fossil fuel funded pension plans and so on, business, banks, as well as MPs will begin to feel the pressure. Yes, you're right. It has to be a total system, cultural system change.
And also, Tom, we are moving towards next year when there could be a general election. So is it MP Watch a way of making MPs realise they face, a contest with people who are more savvy on climate change than them? And will you want to involve candidates in what you do as well?
Well, yes, I think part of our success has been on the doorstep in the constituencies that have doorstep people. Once people realise through leaflets put in their letterboxes in advance that we're not visiting to make political points, and they realise that we are giving them information that is important for their own well-being. Then they listen, and I think, and then they spread the conversation. So it's I've forgotten the question. What was the question?
Well, I was just saying, are you going to involve candidates as well as
Well,
MPs?
yes, and already there are people I think in Thanet we're in discussion with someone who is going to be up against Craig McKinley. We've already had conversations with an unsuccessful person who was unsuccessful to get the Labour nomination in Wickham. Strangely, that person was for airport expansion. I don't know why they chose that issue, given it was Wickham.
And he said he was green as well.
Yeah.
But we just said that can't be so.
Yeah. So I think already we've had some influence behind the scenes. So yes, on all, as I say, on all fronts.
I think that by the next election, Francis, we want every MP watch group to have analysed all the candidates, at least the candidates who have a chance, and to be able to present their strengths and weaknesses in a very straightforward way to other voters within the constituency. That's a kind of minimum level requirement, I think, for the groups.
So is that, Jessica, your main outcome, or you said you're a dreamer? Do you have a bigger outcome at the end of the day for this?
Well, I mean, our sort of the lowest bar, still not without its difficulties, is to try and unseat deniers, so they are not a force in the next government. If we were active in 100 seats, I think that we would have an effect on the election, and people would notice it, and we will have an effect on the public discussion around the election. Whether that has the MP Watch attachment to it, or we won't be the only Green groups working. There will be the Green Party itself, of course, but there will be organisations like yours. All the grassroots people will pile in. I think I'll be very surprised if XR and Just Stop Oil don't do things, for example.
So, I mean, if a group, if you wanted to get your 100 groups, and of course there are all the other organisations as well, and if a group wanted to get started, if they wanted to be involved with you, what advice would you give them about getting started and how they would do it? Because it's quite, it's quite intimidating, really, sometimes to get something like this going.
Okay, I just quickly finish. My big ambition would be to have an MP Watch group in every constituency. Then we will definitely have an effect, and we would be like the teals in Australia, that everybody would know that there's like a new appetite for carbon net zero. So you're right, it can feel a little bit like it's a lot of work, but we're here to help. If somebody feels inclined to start a group, the best thing to do is to do a little bit of research about your MP, have a look on They Vote for Us, and look at their social media. Then reach out to other people who might be disenchanted as well, and have a think about what might be possible. The minimum that a watch group can begin with is a Twitter or a Facebook page, which tracks what the MP is doing and saying. And that really doesn't take all that much effort. But then if you can get a group together, letter to the local paper is a good thing. A launch event is a great idea, and maybe a crowdfunder, because if you can start a crowdfunder, then you've got money for doing some leafleting and some door knocking, as Tom says. And I think it was a very important thing that Tom said earlier. If you, as a citizen, knock on somebody's door and say, I'm your neighbour from down the road, and I'm worried about climate change, what do you think? do you know that our MP is either, you know, a climate denier or isn't really working hard enough on this? What do you think we should do? Then you're not going there with a rosette that puts people off. You're not going there with, you know, forgive me, Christian religion, which puts other people off. You're going there just as one human being to another to say, I'm worried about this issue. I'm worried about my grandchildren, my children, myself, the earth, animals, you know, whatever it is that is your passion. If you share that with people, even if they come from the other side of the argument, I think they are impressed by your being there, taking time out of your life to talk to them.
That is, in essence, deliberative, rhizomatic, deliberative democracy.
Okay, so, you know, we've sort of come to the end of our 30 minutes now. And I mean, it's been a good discussion, and you've talked very well about what people could do and what you're doing. If they wanted to get directly in touch with you, Tom, how, or look at your website, how would they do it? How would they get involved?
Well, very simply, mpwatch.org. That's the conduit for conversation. And as well as everything Jessica said, we also are rapidly building resources. As each group has successes, we are compiling resources which will really give a starting point, and pulling in expertise from other areas, economic expertise and so on. So the conversation would start immediately with any contact with us. We would be right there to help on the front line. Okay,
well, thank you both for taking part, because I think, you know, we know that climate change is the huge crisis that's facing us all. We know we only have a short window in to make a difference. And we know that we have to influence those people who can make a difference. And I think setting up the MP Watch nationally, as you have done, is really important, because it helps to galvanize local groups and it gives them a focus. So I hope people will make contact with you. I hope they will form local groups. I hope, Jessica, you'll get more than your 100. You'll get more, you know, much more than that.
One in everyone.
Well, yeah, and then it will make a difference. So thanks. I mean, I think you've explained everything really well.
Can we thank you for what you're doing as well? Because the work in Enfield seems tremendous. We're very grateful that you're part of the network. And as we say, we use you as a kind of model of one approach to take. And it's a very intelligent approach to get your MP to focus at least once a month on some aspect of the climate crisis. So thank you, and thank all the people involved in your network.
Okay, well, remember, flattery gets you nowhere, but please don't stop. Anyhow, yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, you know, that's been a really, really good discussion. So we'll end this webinar now.
Okay, thank you, Francis.